Do you have hope that we will retain our basic liberties in the midst of this change?
Well, you've described the contest perfectly. And of course, I don't know the answer, but I know that if we do nothing, I know the answer. It'll get worse. And then the Hitlers or the Mussolinis, they will take over, and they're around. Matter of fact, they're already in vain. They're now bold enough to run as communists and socialists and all this stuff, and the lack of liberty.
Tucker Carlson just interviewed Dr. Ron Paul, the former congressman and former presidential candidate, and someone I would credit for getting me back involved in the political system when he ran for president in 2012. So I owe a lot to him. He has some pretty interesting things to say, and so I break down the highlights in this video, and I don't think there's a better way to get started than the prediction montage that Tucker Carlson put together for him. Let's watch.
Here's a selection of Ron Paul predictions from 2002. Keep in mind, that was almost 25 years ago, and Ron Paul saw it clearly. Watch.
Mr. Speaker, our government intervention in the economy, the private affairs of citizens, and the internal affairs of foreign countries leads to uncertainty and many unintended consequences. Here are some of the consequences about which we should be concerned. I predict U.S. taxpayers will pay to rebuild Palestine, both the West Bank and the Gaza, as well as Afghanistan. U.S. taxpayers paid to bomb these areas, so we will be expected to rebuild them. Peace of sorts will come to the Middle East, but will be short-lived. There will be big promises of more U.S. money and weapons flowing to Israel and to Arab countries allied with the United States. Federal Reserve policy will continue at an expanding rate with massive credit expansion, which will make the dollar crisis worse. Gold will be seen as an alternative to paper money as it returns to its historic role as money. Military and police powers will grow, satisfying the conservatives. The welfare state, both domestic and international, will expand, satisfying the liberals. Both sides will endorse military adventurism overseas. During the next decade, the American people will become poorer and less free, while they become more dependent on the government for economic security. The war will prove to be divisive, with emotions and hatred growing between the various factions and special interests that drive our policies in the Middle East. Agitation from more class warfare will succeed in dividing us domestically. And believe it or not, I expect lobbyists will thrive more than ever during the dangerous period of chaos. I have no timetable for these predictions, but just in case, keep them around and look at them in 5 to 10 years. Let's hope and pray that I'm wrong on all accounts.
I mean, wow, all those predictions, like almost all those predictions have come true to a T. It's interesting. He was right on Palestine. Obviously, Trump is talking about rebuilding Palestine. He's right about this temporary peace in the Middle East, which no one believes is going to last very long. He's definitely right about us getting poor as a country. He's definitely right about the police state ushered in by the right. Let's just look at what just happened here in Metro Surge and the fact that we had like 3,000 federal agents in the Twin Cities, and the right is all arguing that this is a good thing. And they're masked agents, by the way. And then the left and the just runaway welfare state. I mean, in case you haven't noticed, that's the biggest driver of our national debt, a debt that's going to be paid by our children and grandchildren. Right? And in Minnesota, where it's like we just can't end this welfare state, like we just got a new program here, paid family leave, which is gonna be way overrun in cost, and not to mention the child care and the autism centers, all the other stuff that's being fraudulently used by a lot of communities, but one in particular. So all these predictions come true. So you got to wonder, how does this guy know this stuff, and where does he get his insight from? And that was one of the first questions Tucker covered with him. So let's get into it.
I remember traveling with you on a campaign that you did in the fall of 2007, and you gave speeches about the Federal Reserve. And I remember thinking, I know nothing about the Federal Reserve. I don't see how this is a big issue. I was completely wrong. How were you able to tell almost 20 years ago that monetary policy would determine the future of the country?
Well, it's because I got fascinated with this issue a long time ago, and I studied Austrian economics, and they emphasize these various things. They teach you to think about the ramifications of policy, and they also warn us who are involved not to try to predict the day things are going to happen. But trends are very important. And if you, for instance, if you print too much money, the value of the money goes down.
Yeah.
And history shows the history is very important because countries have practiced these issues and trying to get a free lunch. And, they've been doing it even before Roman days, of the abuse of the monetary system. So monetary policy became fascinating with me, and it was especially emphasized, on August 15th, 1971, because the predictions of Austrian economics during the 60s, when I was reading about economics, and especially economics, Mises and Hayek and others, they said this would happen. And that was that was our first declaration of bankruptcy. We said, yeah, we printed money, we passed it out. We said it's as good as gold, $35 an ounce. It was all a fib. They knew they had to know a little bit about history, but they always think this time is going to be different. We're smarter than they are. We have computers, and they talking to themselves, and they convince themselves that they can get by and keep from the trouble that printing money and subsidizing big government always fails.
Okay, don't mind me if I nerd out a little bit, but I just, when I knew I was going to do this subject today, I brought my Ron Paul in the Fed book, which was so interesting because back in the campaign days, people were chanting in the Fed, and here I am on this financial advisor just going, I can't believe this room full of young people are talking about the Federal Reserve. I know what they do. I know how they manipulate the interest rates and affects my clients, but most people, how do they know about this stuff? It was because of Ron Paul. And he's, inspired by other people. Murray Rothbard, The Case Against the Fed. He talks about Hayek. I'm sure I got Hayek and Mises up on there. I think I got Mises's book. Yeah, there we go. This is his treatise, The Theory of Money and Credit. And he's talking about the Austrian School of Economics, which basically is what differentiates them from a lot of the other schools is they really look at the policies at the Federal Reserve, or the centralized economic powers, and what they do to interest rates and what they do with the money supply and how that affects the overall economy. And a lot of people just don't even look at that stuff. They act as if this is a normal activity. It's not. It's actually cheating. And we talk about that all the time on this show. And he talks about this has gone back to the Roman days. They used to coin clip. When they needed to manipulate the money supply, they'd bring in the currency and they'd clip the coin so it'd be less metal content, and then they'd redistribute it. So the literally there's less physical amounts of money. That's why the old barters internationally in trade had the scales, because they got to weigh it, right? You want to have a certain weight. You look at the dollar today. I'm just taking this out of my swear bucket here for the show, and then you look at and on the top it says Federal Reserve note right there on the top of your dollar. Just go look in your pocket. Federal Reserve note. What does that even mean? Doesn't say silver certificate. And so Ron Paul talks about 1971, the breakdown of the Bretton Woods Agreement, where we would not make good on gold payments for dollar bills. And at one point you could go into the bank and you could get silver back for your dollar bills. They used to put silver in some of our coins. They used to put copper in pennies. They haven't put copper in pennies since 1981. They've been cheating us this long. And so this is such an important topic. So why has Ron Paul been so good at predicting a lot of these things? Because Ron Paul reads Mises, right? He reads these great authors of the Austrian School of Economics. And so he's learned and made these predictions. And it's also why I think he bought gold. Let's listen to the next segment.
The United States the U.S. government claims to have the world's largest gold reserves. Some of them are held in Fort Knox. They haven't actually been audited in a real way in almost 100 years, despite the lot of lying about it. Why haven't America's gold reserves been audited, bar for bar? And what do you think that tells us?
Well, it's sort of a characteristic of what we're dealing with today in the current events, that you can't tell the truth because, truth is treasonous, to empires.
Yes.
and that they can't tell the truth, but they also have to have the people behind it. Somebody has to get something from it. And the deep state, the military-industrial complex, and, the drug companies, all, they get something from it. But it finances bad things, and therefore they're talked into it. So the people support it, and then other people say, we know better, and we'll be cautious, and we know how to run a monetary system, better than ever. But they don't. It looks like, a free lunch. But it isn't. It's based on, if they had dealt with it in a serious way, in a moral sense, that printing money and telling the people that it's backed by gold and it's steady and we could have the currency, the reserve currency of the world, and we're going to get rich over. Well, that was half true because it wasn't true, but it worked for a little while and it still works to a degree. But I think the handwriting is on the wall. This is not going to continue. And I think that's why we've seen an explosion of our problems. And the one thing that I look at, or two things, because they're one and the same, is the debt going up and what the price of gold is. Because the price of gold, although it can be rigged and delayed, but ultimately the price of gold is telling you there's problems out there. So there's something big going on, but it's just sort of a catch-up of all the things that we've been doing.
And Ron Paul is right about that. I mean, there's probably not much gold at Fort Knox. And does it even matter? I mean, our dollar is not backed by gold. There's no pretense that this Federal Reserve note gets you any gold in exchange. Its value is continuing to drop, and we all know that because we buy things in our economy. And by the way, if you're like me and you've bought gold and you bought it a long time ago, that has been relatively stable. I mean, we look good right now, yes, of course. I mean, gold's price is going up quite a bit against the dollar, but it still buys the same relative goods and services it would have bought us 10, 20 years ago. And so government continues to cheat. And Ron Paul makes such a good point about this stuff, and it's why he's been a gold buyer for decades. Smart move, right? Let's talk about, I mean, this is all, to me, this is doom and gloom, right? This is really bad, and I think we got some really bad times ahead of us. But I think the most important thing that Ron Paul talked about in this interview is there is hope, and I agree with them. I am optimistic too here with the future generations, and if we can reestablish these tenets of liberty and educate the youth, I think we can really do some amazing things, and our country can rebound. So let's hear what he has to say about that.
Do you have hope that, as you said, there are some people on both sides calling for fascism, calling for communism. People feel insecure. Our old systems are going away. You said that clearly. And everybody feels that. And so they're calling for a central power to calm things down. That's the trend that I see. Mm-hmm. Do you have hope that we will retain our basic liberties in the midst of this change?
Well, you've described the contest perfectly. And, of course, I don't know the answer, but I know that if we do nothing, I know the answer. It'll get worse. And then the Hitlers or the Mussolinis, they will take over, and they're around. Matter of fact, they're already in vain. They're now bold enough to run as communists and socialists and all this stuff, and the lack of liberty. So, but I still am an optimist because we are getting good stuff out on the internet, and there's a lot of people that know this. Just like now, there are so many people call, they want to have an interview, and I say, well, what's this? And here is somebody that heard me talk 20 years ago.
Yes.
And he has his own organization. The war is on, but it's ideological for me. And I think that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful about talk show hosts, whether they're on TV or radio or whatever, because we have to change people's minds.
Yes.
And because just bulldoze it in and say, well, he's a bad guy. Let's boycott. Let's shoot him. Let's put him in prison. Let's get control of the Department of Justice, and we're going to do good. I mean, it's a vicious, bad idea, so that we who believe in something have to present the cause for liberty.
Yes, and I'm very optimistic as well, and I do believe in the future of this country. And I think that's the whole mission of those of us in new media, is to spread the word and the message of liberty and make a great case. I think we have to be concerned about Madami's rise and ability to win the New York mayor race, and how big of a movement Bernie had. I mean, these are socialists, and they don't even shy away from calling themselves socialist. And socialism is really bad. It's been tried. It doesn't work. And it's anti-freedom. But I think when people hear about freedom, and we saw this during COVID, not everyone was on our side. Like when we were fighting against the COVID lockdowns, not everyone was on our side to start out, but they learned, and we spread out the message, which is exactly why government tries censoring people like us. But that's my hope, and that's why I think we have an optimistic future, is because the internet, it's like the equalizer. And that's why I'm so happy to be a part of this, a small part of this new media, getting this message out. And there's so many people at a much larger scale doing this kind of stuff. And I think this is very empowering and gives us a lot of hope for the future. But let me know what you think. Leave a comment in the comment section. And if you enjoy my content, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.